Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. Apologize starting session late, and yeah, here we are. And then this session is about study architecture in the UK. So I am Trudy from University for Creative Arts, and we have Charlotte here from Ladbroke University and Lee here from Ravensbourne University, London. So what we discussed, what we will cover today. So later on in the session, we will covering what study in the UK and how to choose a university, what exactly architecture, what kind of like we require for architecture degree, and then we'll give you more introduction about interior architecture and design, general entry requirement for architecture program, and of course we will covering for portfolio, careers, and including the alumni. And also we will show you a bit more our contact information. If you need some more information, of course you can contact us directly. Just to remind you for this session, because it is recorded, please do not leave your personal information in the Q&A session or in the chat. We won't be able to share this webinar later on. So thank you so much. Just a quick introduction about UCA. So we are a very specialized university in the UK, and we are specialized in especially architecture area, and also like business management for creative industry. And also we have fashion, animation, filmmaking, performing arts, graphic design. So we are quite specialized in those areas. And just for your information, our architecture school is ranked UK number 5 at the moment, which is not listed here. And we have, of course, our business schools if you're interested in like study more like a commercial business side. For the creative industry, of course, you can study business course as well, but here's information just for you to read. And for us, we have 4 campuses. So 2 are located in Surrey and another 2 located in Kent. Probably we'll have a map here, and then we'll show you a bit more information where we are exactly. And our program, I would say, pretty practical. So especially architecture, you will be working in the studios every single day and working on your project. Architecture, I would say, compared with other art design courses, it involves a lot quite technical as well. So you need to actually building things, and then involved with a lot of group project and your individual project. There will be a lot of events or competition you can go into around the surrounded campus, and also in London as well. So our students, basically, when they study architecture, they're doing 1-year experience, and after they complete 3 years degree, and then they intend to work in London doing a 1-year professional experience, which is what we'll introduce you a bit later. So exactly what's the format for architecture in the UK. Yeah, this is UCA. Now I'm passing on to Lee, and he will give you a bit more information about his institution.
Thanks, Trudy. So my name is Lee. I'm from Ravensbourne University, London. We are a small creative specialist in North Greenwich in Southeast London. So if you've ever been to London and been to the O2 Arena or seen what we used to call the Millennium Dome, our campus is right opposite there. So a nice, small, kind of quiet part of Southeast London, but right in the heart of the city on the Jubilee line. These are some of our kind of statistics that we're most proud of. We are a very industry related university. So we work with a lot of employers across all of our courses, and industry contact is embedded through all 3 years of study at Ravensbourne. So we're very proud that particularly the second one, 76% of our graduates are working in the field that they've trained in upon graduation. So architecture students would be working in the architecture field, media students working in media, etc. And the image on the left, the Venn diagram, just illustrates kind of our 3 pillars of what we aim to teach you at Ravensbourne and the values and the culture that we set at Ravensbourne. So we ask you to be creative, think outside the box. We're quite a modern university, so we have a lot of non-traditional teaching spaces. We encourage you to be collaborative and work together, and that feeds into being inclusive. So equality, diversity, and inclusion is a big part of what we do at Ravensbourne, and that permeates through all of your projects that you do, the way that you work with other students, and the contact that you have with each other. And the top one is being integrated with industry. Many of our students are working professionally by the time they're in year 3, and a lot of them are progressing into employment with the employer that they've worked with at some point during their degree. So there's a real pipeline of students graduating and going straight into industry across all of our departments, but particularly within architecture as well. And I'm sure I'll tell you a little bit more about it later, but I think now it's over to you, Charlotte.
Thank you very much, Lee. So my name is Charlotte. If you've not met me yet this week, I work at Loughborough University as one of our international officers, and I also studied at Loughborough. So Loughborough is a multidisciplinary university. So as well as being very, very good in creative arts, design, media, and creative subjects, we also teach engineering, science, sport, business, management, social sciences, lots of different subjects. So yeah, very multidisciplinary. We are 2 campuses. So we have the campus on the screen, which is our main campus in Loughborough, which is where all of our undergraduate programs sit. And we also have a postgraduate only campus in London on what was the Olympic Park. So at our Loughborough campus, we have our School of the Arts, which teaches fine art, graphic design, textiles and fashion design. And we also have our design school, which does industrial design, product design and user experience design. We've also got schools of media, and that's where our architecture program sits within our Department of Civil and Building Engineering. And we are ranked top 10 in the UK for all of our league tables. And our campus is my favourite place. So you're looking at the UK and studying architecture, but where are we? This week we have universities joining us from all over the UK, and the universities that you have today that you can look at are situated all over. So myself at Loughborough, I am speaking to you from right in the middle of England at the moment. In the East Midlands, Loughborough itself is a market town, 10 minutes to Leicester, 20 minutes to Nottingham as our nearest cities. And then Lee is in London. I'm sure many of you will have been to London, and Trudy is at the University of Creative Arts, which have, I believe, campuses in London and in Kent and in Surrey. Is that right, Trudy? It is, yeah, so different campuses. And then there are other universities this week who are down in the south of the UK, up in the north in Leeds and in Liverpool. So all over the UK. And as we're talking about architecture, very different types of architecture on all of our campuses and all of our different universities as well. So that might be a consideration when you are studying with us. And if you look at the features of the UK higher education system, when you are looking particularly at architecture, you will see there are similarities between architecture degrees at all of our institutions. And this is because architecture as a specialized subject, if you're taking a straight architecture degree, you will find that that is normally controlled, for want of a better word, by our accrediting bodies. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but you'll find that many of the courses in the UK for architecture are quite similar, as it is a specialized subject to lead you directly into a career. In the UK, our degree is a fixed length of study, and there are lots of kind of focuses on how you will study, from small group teaching, lots of independent learning. You will be encouraged to think outside the box, to bring your ideas to the table, both in your coursework, in your tutorials and seminars. At architecture at Loughborough, we have our architecture studio, architecture building. All students get their studio space. It's one big studio area where you'll get your desk and your area, and in amongst you is all of our academics. So you'll be in your studio with the academic staff who are doing their research. So it's real independent, small group, but community learning at the same time. And also in the UK, we encourage you to work while you study. So you have the placement years on architecture courses where you will go out for a year and get a year of experience, but also opportunities to do internships in your summer holidays and your Easter holidays, but also a lot of projects as part of your degree, which are set by industry. So you'll be getting a real hands-on degree, really solving problems. Last year, our first year students at Loughborough were set a project by a local school who wanted to create an outdoor classroom. So they came to the university and they asked our architecture students to design this. So they had a full brief, as they would be doing within industry. They went out, they spoke to the students, the parents, the teachers, and they went back and designed what they would anticipate as an outdoor classroom. A winning group got their design put into real life, essentially, so they're involved in the building practice. And that was in the first year of an architecture degree. So yeah, really good place to study in the UK. And if you're looking at studying in the UK, studying architecture, you will find that architecture varies massively across different universities. Although they'll be teaching the same sort of thing in line with the accreditation, the way they teach it will be different. And in the UK, you will find that you have creative specialist universities like we have today, who will come from a more creative background for architecture. And because of that, the entry requirements will probably be looking at your creative subjects. There are universities in the UK who focus on architecture as a science and will look for a science background. And then there are universities in the UK who have a mix of both. Loughborough's there, for example, and we welcome students with both an arts or a science background and don't have any particular subject requirements. But that will help you decide whether you want to go to a big multi-faculty university, whether you want to go to a small creative specialist university. You'll also be able to look when you're choosing your university at rankings and reputation. You may have been in some of the other sessions earlier where we discussed the importance of rankings, looking at league tables, formal rankings, student satisfaction, employability statistics, lots of different awards in the UK for universities. They will help give you an idea of the kind of reputation of your university, but do look into kind of subject specific. And also remember, it's important that you go to a university that you're going to feel happy at as well. And also rankings do change. Just because a university is in the top 10 this year doesn't mean it will be in 5-7 years time when you graduate from your degree, and the other way around as well. Also looking at choosing university, think about the location. Where do you want to be? And also a good way to find out about this is speaking to a current student to see how they find their time at university. I think I'm passing over to Trudy.
That will be me. So I give you a bit more information about architecture in the UK. What is a RUBAR and what do you need to do? So basically for architecture courses, if you want to become a registered architect in the future, then you will need to like take in different parts. So the first part is RUBAR Part 1. So basically we're understanding as a UG degree, which is bachelor degree, which is recognized by Architect Registration Board, ARB, and 1 year practical year with experience 4 to 5 years. So basically if you want to study professionally, so you will need to take the first part, and then in total it will be 5 years together. And then once you complete the first part, and then you will need to go on to the professional practice, and then including the RUBAR Part 2, which is like a master degree, but and also, as I mentioned in the slides here, so you have to study, or you have to involve or do like a minimum 12 months experience. So I mentioned earlier, so majority of our architecture students, they finish their bachelor degree, which is RUBAR Part 1, and they went to a surrounded area, which is our architecture school in Kent, and then they went to London to do a lot experience. They work in the industry, and then once they complete this minimum 12-month experience, and they came back, or they carry on to study RUBAR Part 2 in different institutions in London as well. And for the RUBAR Part 2, also there is a written oral exam as well, and assessment, and also from your previous work or experience. And then you also need to take professional exam as well once you complete those 2 parts. So this is becoming a registered architect in the UK. Let's go to next slide. And what is the architecture in the UK? What is it? So the architecture actually involves a lot skills, and it involves a lot of knowledge in their like management skills, and then a bit more professional construction as well. But it's not all the university requires exactly math and mathematics in there, but you have to understanding about mathematics as well. But if you become an architect in the future, and then you don't need to do the calculation actually by yourself, you will have a team to do this for you, but it's more also involved with teamwork as well. So you cannot finish one project by yourself, it's always work with team. So it's a more like a collaboration, and also of course there will be more like engineering, and also more like a creative as well. And it's really depending on the individual, how you develop yourself, and also that's, there's some area, but basically what we're looking at, like management, professional, construction, and also technical as well. It involves a lot of buildings, design as well, probably a bit of calculation, but as I mentioned earlier, you don't need to do exactly the calculation by yourself, but you need to have understanding about those mathematics. And of course, the architecture course is always working in the studio. So as you can see, using UCA as example, I believe other Loughborough and Riversville University, the same. We all have students working on campus, especially for architecture students, building I would say the space, or the building houses using different material, they're presenting themselves on campus, or even though going to the events as well. So there is a lot, I would say the architecture courses will be mainly studio work, and there will be from my understanding from our own institution will be around probably 70 to 80% practical, and then that will be more like research as well, about 20 to 30% as well. And so undergraduate course, architecture about part 1. So basically for the art design university, so heavily focusing on the creative concepts of a architecture, including explorer of art process and theory. And then that is for the university who are specialized in the art design. But for the multi-faculty university, probably usually collaborates. Sorry, try to move this. Probably usually collaborates with urban planning and the civil engineering courses as well. But also if you're interested in those areas, and then some specialized UK university, they also provide like urban planning, landscape designing, and also other like interior design courses as well. And also usually for the art design university, usually collaborates with other courses, as I mentioned earlier, like interior design, VR, and also like creative computing as well. So that's a more like a specialized art design university. That's how they collaborate with students on course. But for the multi-faculty university, it will be more like lecturing, having teaching style, and fewer more studios hours. Of course, you can looking at the both, but if you want to study architecture, I would recommend you to do more research, like Charlotte and they mentioned earlier about location and also campus studio place as well. Those are really, really important. You don't want to enroll to the program or to the university, which is you have limited space to expand yourself, your skills, or your ability. And for architecture design university, for the arts and design university will be as mentioned earlier, will be a long studio session, and which will be fewer lectures, which is more like project based. But for the multi-faculty university will be, like I said earlier, will be more like a lecture, everything, and also interact with the students from huge range of academic interests as well. So it's a very diverse skill set along with a student's body. But for the art design university will be more encouraging to work with more like art design students rather than academic students. So for the art design university will be encouraging you to explore more on art design subjects like sculpture or printmaking. Of course, there is other courses available on campus as well, like I would say as a UCA example, we have a business management course. I knew some architecture students, they want to work with the business students side as well, which is they have a running a competition, probably they need the management side to help the students. But this business students, they are more focused on the creative industry rather than in the overall business industry. And for the multi-faculty university probably will be more like engage you to explore like a business or marketing subject rather than just art design. And for the portfolio, I will say the portfolio quite central to application with a lower grade requirements for the art design university. But for the other university, probably will require a higher grade with probably like a more important to the grade rather than the portfolio. And for the art design university, probably will be more often I'd say cutting edge, and also for the multicultural multi-faculty university will be often focus on structural engineering, those courses. So basically, when you're choosing the architecture course, you need to do a bit more research about which university and what that are they specialized in. Are they specialized in like more towards academic side, or are they more focusing on the art design side? So that will be make quite a big difference, because you need a space, you need to actually work with the tutor quite closely as well to complete a lot of project, and also the environment and the I would say diverse cultural background, diverse students will be give you quite a lot of influence as well. So do think about it when you apply for the university. Don't look at the overall ranking all the time. Just try to look the course ranking and what they're good at, what this university good at, and just look more into like this area rather than the overall ranking. But of course, if you to work to more that side, of course, it's in the end, it's a UK bachelor degree, so which is give you the other like kind of like a pathway to or stepping stone to your career in the future. But it's really depending yourself. What do you want from your study, or what do you want for your future career? And then based on that, and then choose the right university to study your architecture degree. Of course, here's some more information about postgraduate architecture courses. If you don't want to go through this Aruba Part 1, Part 2 route, and of course you can choose in MA architecture only. In the UK in general, we have a 1 year full-time studies. So here is some more information. I'm not going to read the sentence here because it's quite complicated. I don't want you to fall asleep because I'm reading it. So I leave here for you to read, and I leave there for you to do more research about the postgraduate architecture. It's really depend on yourself. If you want to becoming architect in the future, of course you need to do Ruba Part 1, Ruba Part 2, which is mentioned here. And but if you just want to study in general like about architecture courses, you can do MA like BA architecture course, and also to continue your further study as a BA MA architecture, which is only 1 year full-time study in the UK. And here is more information about other courses, which is under architecture, like interior architecture design, which is, I believe, for most UK university have like interior architecture or interior design, or there is a more design like industry design or product furniture design. So those are under those courses. For the student who are more interested at interior, probably you can choose interior architecture design. And also there will be a lot of things involved, because whether you're choosing architecture or interior architecture design, that we always work with architecture students quite closely, I believe. And also you work with different, I would say, discipline students as well for each courses, even though you only focus on architecture course, and then you can work with like the, I would say, interior, of course, and also like product, furniture design student. Quite often that happens, and also probably need a little bit idea from fashion students sometimes. So that can be, it's a bit kind of like a big gap between fashion and architecture, but students are very creative. They may work together for something else. I see students from fashion and architecture, they work together actually. Of course, I mentioned earlier will be like fashion students work with interior architecture or interior design students. So those are the, the flexibility when you study architecture degree in the UK, and especially if you're choosing art design university. So there is a lot of area you can collaborate with different students' background. And here I'm handing back to Lee, give you a bit more introduction, what's in requirement, what's portfolio, and then, yeah, here you go, Lee.
Thanks so much, Trudy and Charlotte. So in terms of entry requirements and how to apply it, I think it's been mentioned earlier in the session, but it really varies from university to university, and particularly from specialist creative universities to multi-faculty universities. They have slightly different entry requirements. Multi-faculties will tend to be higher in terms of their grade boundaries and probably place less emphasis over the portfolio, whereas creative universities tend to be the opposite. We place more emphasis on the portfolio and the interview rather than your academic grades. So it's worth doing your research in advance, looking at your own grades and what your predicted grades may be, or your actual grades if you've already received them. and which universities would suit you and your style of learning and where you want to go with your career in architecture. The first thing you want to think about is whether you're applying through UCAS or whether you're applying directly. UCAS is the Universities and Colleges Admissions Service. So for students in the UK, so whether you're a UK student or an international student studying in the UK, generally you would apply through the UCAS route. But you can apply through UCAS even if you are an international student. There's no limitations on that. It tends to just be a difference depending on whether you are applying with the support of an agent or whether you're applying directly as part of your school. Most schools will use the UCAS process because it's able to be tracked, and it gives access to careers advisors and counsellors to be able to track that process. Most universities also support direct applications where you would apply directly to the university. If you are applying direct, it means you can apply to multiple different universities, whereas UCAS, you are limited to 5 choices, but you do get a bit more safety and security in that process. Different architecture degrees will require maths. As I think Trudy mentioned, the multi-faculty universities may look more at your grades and your subjects that you're studying, whether it's your A-levels, your IB, or your home country qualifications. Most creative universities don't require maths, but I think a lot of multi-faculty universities may look at maths or perhaps science-based degrees for their entry requirements. And we also take into account the student profile. So what you need to remember is that it's a long process to becoming an architect, and as such that needs to be reflected in things like your personal statement, in your portfolio to an extent, but also at your interview, the values that you give off, the embodiment of who you are as a person should be what you tell people at interview or dictate in your personal statement, that you are hardworking, that you are prepared for a challenge, that you're detailed focused, that you're committed, because it is a long process to getting to that point where you are a fully fledged architect. And we need to see that before you even start at university. So please bear those values in mind when you're applying for university, and try to start embodying them now. Everyone can put it in their personal statement. Everyone can say that they're committed and hardworking and they have an attention to detail, but you need to start practicing that in real life as well, because otherwise when you do get on an architecture degree, it may come as a little bit of a shock when you are asked to do those 40-hour weeks and it's long days and long periods of study in the library or in the workshops. So next slide please, Trudy. I'm going to talk a little bit now about portfolios. Portfolios for architecture courses are always a little bit funny because certainly not in the UK and probably not internationally, there's no such thing as an architecture A-level or an architecture BTEC or an architecture qualification. So many of the students that we have applying for architecture come from completely different backgrounds. And that's, I think, a real strength that architecture courses up and down the UK have. They have students that are interested in design and creative based approaches to architecture, and then you have students that are interested in the structural engineering and the science and the maths based focus on architecture. So when you're building your portfolio, think about your strengths and your abilities, whether you are more detail orientated and looking at the maths and the science and the structure of buildings, whether you're looking at the creative side of it and the aesthetic and how buildings look and feel and the interiors. And what that means is, in some ways, it's very, very difficult to build your portfolio because you've never studied architecture. But at the same time, it makes it very easy to build your portfolio because you can just focus on the things that you have done and try to tailor them towards an architecture degree. And the main things that we want to see is you and your work. So we want to see for starters, your creative journey. We want to see how you've developed over your 2 or your 3 most recent years at school, college, or sixth form. And we want to see your thought process. And your influences. So the main bulk of that comes in the form of projects. We like to see a few different projects that you've worked on from start to finish. And we like to see how you've developed those ideas over a period of time, and the longevity of those projects. So when you're thinking about that, don't afraid to be bold and be ambitious in the projects that you're undertaking, but make sure they appeal to the viewer. What you should do is put yourself in the shoes of the person that's viewing your portfolio. Do you have enough information in there? Do you have enough annotations so that the viewer knows what they're looking at? And is the content engaging? Are they being infused by what they're seeing, and holding their attention? And that can come in various different forms, whether it's the subject matter that you're talking about, whether it's the idea of your project, whether it's the way that you've laid out your portfolio, or just the ideas that you're trying to get across and the approach that you have to it, and showing off your creative potential. Yeah, you can go to the next slide, Judy. That's fine. Thank you. So when you're building a portfolio, I think what you also need to remember is that every university is different. So some universities will interview you, some universities will just require a portfolio only, and they will review that in their own time and then come back to you with either an offer or a decline. But generally, most universities will want to see between 16 and 20 pages of work. And that represents 5 to 6 projects. And the reason we ask for this is because architecture is a long process. The first part of your RIBA or your ARB is a 3-year degree, potentially with a professional placement. And as part of those accreditations that you need to gain, you have to do portfolio submissions. So this is a really good exercise in preparing a portfolio, because this is exactly what you're going to have to do at the end of your 3rd year on your undergraduate degree. So by doing this for a portfolio now, it allows the viewer to assess you and say, okay, this person has a really good attention to detail. They can stretch out a project over 5 to 10 pages. They can really understand the design process, the iteration process, and come out with a final polished design. So the bulk of work is quite important, but also the content of your work is really important too. And because there's no such thing as an architecture degree, we're open to seeing everything. So most students will focus on building and concept design for buildings, but architecture is far more than that. Architecture is about the way we interact with spaces, the environment, and buildings. So some students will look at things like town planning and roadways and structures and things like roundabouts and highways. Some students may look at interior design and how they redesign interior spaces. So as an example, if you've never done something like interior design before, but you want to go into that degree, a really good project you can undertake is something just as simple as redesigning your room and changing the layout of your room, making it more aesthetically pleasing. Maybe you're trying to achieve a goal such as creating more floor space in your room, and how do you go about that? You can obviously put it back once you've done it, but going through that process, documenting that process, taking photographs, doing structural design, so looking at the measurements of your room space, and then changing and redesigning based on that, is a really, really good exercise to undertake in the first instance as an introductory exercise to architecture or interior design. You do need to edit the number of pieces, and I think it's probably worth mentioning at this point that we have lived through a pandemic, and we are still living through a pandemic, and some of you coming from international countries may still be under restrictions or in some sort of lockdown. And we understand that many students have missed a lot of practical teaching time, access to studio spaces, or just time to create their projects in an environment where they can. So the requirements and the expectation on portfolios, I think over the last couple of years at universities, has maybe dropped down a little bit because people have missed time and haven't been able to produce the work that they needed to. But that expectation is beginning to creep up now as we come out of these restrictions and these big full lockdowns. The expectation level on the amount of work that you produce coming into a university is beginning to go up again. When building your portfolio, do keep your presentation simple. So that's in terms of your layout and your annotations. Try not to make it too messy. Make sure that your photos are nice and aligned. Your annotations are coordinated in the right space. Annotations are really important, and I would say 20 to 30% of each page should probably be dedicated to annotations. And particularly if you're applying for a course where you submit a portfolio but you don't have an interview, your annotations are really important for contextualizing what the viewer is seeing. Photography is obviously really important, but the words that you apply to that photography can really help accentuate what you're trying to get across with your work, and the detailed information about your projects. Consider the order you're showing your work. Different interviews at different universities will be varying in lengths. Some interviews may be 20, 25 minutes, some might be up to an hour. So always begin with your best work first, and that makes sure that the viewer looking at your portfolio is starting on a really, really strong point. And you can sort of say to the viewer, this is where I'm at with my current development. And then later on in your portfolio, you can say, these were my first projects. These are my projects that weren't as strong. And by doing it that way, it makes sure that you're always focusing on your best work. What you don't want to do is get to the end of an interview because you've run out of time and you haven't got to your best work yet, and you're scrambling around at the end of your interview, asking the interviewer to say, oh, can I just show you this piece of work? This is my best bit, or we haven't got to this yet, but I'd really like to show you this. Always start with your best work and then make sure it's front and center. And you could also think about your portfolio as a piece of music. So telling a story, giving it a beginning, a middle, and an end is a really good thing to do. So generally, we would look at your projects individually, one by one. So that's a kind of layout example for your portfolio. But there is no right or wrong with a portfolio. There's no absolute correct way of doing it. Everyone does it in different ways because it's a creative process, and we expect you to formulate and create your portfolio in different ways. So don't get too hung up on how to structure it and what to include. Just go with the projects that you've produced. Keep everything, don't delete anything, and include everything that you think might be relevant. And also look into the courses in detail as well before you apply and before you submit your portfolio, because courses may have different requirements. They may have the same course title, but they might be completely different in the way that they teach, and the focuses they have on the elements of teaching. So bear that in mind when you're doing your research and constructing your portfolio. Next slide, please, Trudy. So here's some examples of student work. These are some of the things you can expect to kind of approach when you're studying architecture. And architecture itself is a very varied course, although there are certain stipulations and guidances that you have to follow to achieve your accreditations. The approach from university to university is very, very different. And the way that you structure your work and the outputs that you have is very, very different. So you can see just in some of the examples here, there's focuses on design and creative work and illustration. There's also focuses on the more structural side of things, so 3D drawings that would be done in things like computer-aided design programs like Rhinoceros, 2D bird's eye view drawings, which are really helpful for things like floor plans. So if anyone has ever looked at houses before or gone house hunting on things like Rightmove apps, you will always see floor plans. They're really, really integral to architectural buildings, to layouts, and also redesigning and restructuring. And throughout your degree, you'll be asked to work in not only 2D, but also in 3D. And it's a really unique set of skills that you are amassing, probably a greater set of skills than potentially other courses are. So it lends itself to multiple different disciplines. It means you don't have to be an architect at the end of an architecture degree. The skill set that you're gaining lends itself to multiple different industries. And I think it's probably fair to say that the vast majority of people that study architecture don't actually go on to become architects. They will go to work in the architecture field perhaps, but they won't go through that whole three-step process to becoming an architect and spending 7 or 8 years of their time. A lot will kind of tap out, as it were, and go to being architectural assistants, model makers, 3D designers. So there are a vast array of jobs within the field of architecture that don't require you to go the whole process. If you don't want to, you can sort of tap out at that 3-year point or that 5-year point after your master's. So next slide. So careers in the architecture field, if we get to the next slide, I think there's some examples. So as I said, the field itself is huge, and I think architecture is probably one of the constants that is throughout multiple different disciplines. Everything that we see and everything that we do in the world is in some way, shape or form related to architecture. The houses we live in, the transport links that we use to get to work, and then the office spaces that we work in. And generally, what our course tutors say to students when they come to an open day at Ravensbourne is we ask you to think about 3 different areas: work, rest and play. And those are the spaces and those are the things that you can approach when you're studying an architecture degree. So the spaces we work in, office spaces, high-rise buildings, the spaces we rest in, so housing, and maybe holiday homes, and then the spaces that we play in. So that could be football stadiums, it could be interior play spaces for children, it could be outdoor parks and urban leisure spaces, wherever you can think of. Those are the areas that you'd be going into, and different universities will gear you up for different careers in those different areas, depending on the modules that they teach and the specialisms that they have. But because of the skills that you're learning, and because you're focusing on 2D design, you're focusing on 3D design, model making, prototyping, and traditional kind of illustration and hand drawing, it lends itself to all these careers that you can see in front of you. So I won't go through them one by one. I'll just leave them there for you to look at for a second. But not only kind of massive skills in the field of architecture, but you do it can take you into the creative arts, it can take you into product design and the leisure industry, manufacturing, engineering, and transport. There are multiple different ways that you can take an architecture degree, as well as taking that full process to becoming an architect. And I think I would say it's probably one of the most fluid degrees that you can study in terms of the skills that you will learn and the outputs that you gain. And you are what we would call multidisciplined by the end of a degree in architecture. So lots of different pathways out of it. Next slide, please. In terms of your research, keep exploring. Those of you that are applying for university this year to start in 2022, it's great that you're here and you're doing that research, and hopefully you've already applied or you're in the process of applying. And that September enrollment date will come around very, very soon. But for those of you that are looking for 2023 entry or further beyond, which I would imagine is the vast majority of people here, it's really great that you're taking the time to do this research early. And I'd encourage you after today, engage with the universities and keep going and keep doing that research, whether that's chatting to current students. Many universities subscribe to services like UniBuddy, where you can chat to current students on the course page of the website, and you can drop them a message, they'll read it at a certain point and then come back to you with answers. And speaking to current students, or indeed alumni, if you know, or you find them on LinkedIn or other various spaces like that, they will teach you a lot about the course. They will teach you a lot about what it's like to study there as a student. Obviously, you've got people like Charlotte who studied at Loughborough themselves, so can talk to you about the campus, the environment, the style of teaching. So really tap into not just the online resources and the websites and the prospectuses, but also tap into the human resources, the students, the staff, and as well as videos. But open days are fantastic things to come to. If you're international currently, it's always a good idea to maybe book a trip to the UK and maybe spend a week or 2 weeks in the UK if you can, and maybe try and book a couple of different open days to come to. But the great thing now as an international student, and the pandemic has kind of forced us into this, is that many universities now have online open days or online events such as these. But we also have virtual tours to allow people to visit our campus virtually, whether that's just through a video walkthrough tour or a virtual reality tour. There are lots of ways to engage with the campus and see it without actually physically coming. So it's never been more accessible to find out about a university and what it's like to be there. You are starting the process early by being here today, which is great. And don't be afraid to ask lots of questions. We're not expecting you to know everything about architecture, even from the point of application. And the more you ask questions, the more informed you are going to be. And when it comes to an interview or submitting your portfolio, the more research and information gathering that you've done, the more informed you're going to be, and the more likely you are to be able to get a place, because architecture is quite a popular degree in the UK. It's very competitive, and not everyone gets a place on architecture degrees. So it's important to do your research and upskill yourself in advance of applying, so that you can be in the best shape possible to get a place, and then make a decision on what's right for you in your future. I always say to everyone that I meet, whether it's an event, a fair, or an online event, there is probably a university in the UK that is perfect for every single one of you in here. And it's your job to figure out what that university is. We can give you all the tools and the information and the guidance, but at the end of the day, you are the unique person that's going to be taking those 3 years at university, and you need to be at the place that's going to be right for you, that's going to support your education in the right way and give you the best platform to succeed. And different universities will be radically different in the outcomes that they give you. No one has a crystal ball. No one's going to say that they are the best university for you. That's only a decision that you can make. But hopefully today has helped you along that journey, and either helped you figure out that one of us 3 is a good university to study, or if we aren't the right university for you, then at least we've gone through a process of elimination and you know that you don't need to apply to us. So hopefully it's been helpful. And next slide, please, Judy. And I think that brings us to the end, just as a car alarm goes on outside my window. So if you have questions, please use the Q&A box or the chat box, whichever one you feel more comfortable using. And we're here for the next 12 or so minutes to help you with any questions you have. And I'm going to go on mute now because that's probably really annoying.
Thank you so much, Lee. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to our presentation. If you have any question, please do put in the Q&A session. We'll give you probably around 2 to 3 minutes for you to type in all the questions, and then welcoming all the questions, please. So while we are waiting for the question, Charlotte, do you want to add anything for the architecture careers? Anything you want to add in there? No?
I think with architecture, the thing to remember is that it can lead into a direct career if you take the full 7 years, but also, you know, after 3 years or 4 years of study, after RIBA Part 1, it can lead into all sorts of different careers at that point as well. So students haven't got to commit to the full 7 years and do both parts. There are lots of careers within the architectural engineering field after the 3 years. So it's a really good opportunity for transferable skills as well as a direct career.
Yeah, exactly. Because I saw some students who are already architect and come back for another course and even a business. So there is a lot career opportunity. I think, yeah, just seeing a lot. When I work in a campus, I can see a student actually they making things on campus, they building things. It's really, really interesting. It's quite interesting course. So myself personally, I'm really interested in interior design courses. And then I was thinking, because every time I look at the course studio, what they've been doing, what they've been designing using all the, the software, 2D, 3D design is a really, really interesting course. Yeah, I think it's a really good opportunity for students to kind of study actually in the UK for architecture courses.
Yeah, I agree.
Good. Any questions? No questions? Waiting for a question. There we go. There is a question. How important is AAHL and the physical HL? I'm sorry, I don't really understand this.
So that would be if a student's taking IB, do they need to take maths,
yeah, it's the
AA,
International
HL, and
Baccalaureate, I
physics?
think.
That will depend on the universities you're applying to. So at Loughborough, we don't have any specific requirements. We don't need maths or physics at HL. And I presume you guys as creative universities also don't require maths or physics at higher level.
Nope.
Some universities in the UK will, if you look at more of the science-based ones. So Bristol, I believe, requires maths and physics at HL for their architecture. Don't quote me on that, but I know there are some. But for most of the universities here this week, and most multidisciplinary, they won't have a particular subject requirement. So if you're coming with a maths and science background, that's great, but you don't have to. We'll be looking more at your creative side.
Thank you. Any other questions? Sometimes it's found really difficult sometimes to remember all the entry requirements from all the different countries from the world.
Yeah. So many.
Yes.
We have something like 165 qualifications in our equivalency tool, and that's not including everything. There's lots that we take on a case-by-case basis.
Exactly, yeah. But what I see is, okay, there's another question. Is there a limit to know how many pages you should have in your portfolio? For UCA, I would say we don't really give the restriction or limitation to the pages, but we are not, I think academic tutor, they want to continue seeing if your page is more than, like your pieces of work more than 20, it's just a bit too much. And also the file itself, the image is quite big as well, so it's difficult for you to send through or uploading as well. So we just keep down 16 to 20 pieces of work in there, but it can be like in terms of academic, they are quite flexible in terms of how many projects in there really, but you can send like 5 to 6 if you want, but you can just send one project if you think that is good enough. But I believe each of our university requires slightly different standards for the portfolio. So I'll hand them back to Lee and Charlotte. They give you a bit more information about their portfolio. Charlotte,
I'll let you go first, Charlotte.
Okay, yeah, I'm just putting our portfolio guide in the chat box. I've just got the link for that. So for at Loughborough, we asked for a maximum of 15 pages, and we want to see kind of full projects. It doesn't necessarily have to be architecture focused. It could be, I've seen an architecture portfolio that includes creative writing before, but that's our guidance. And unfortunately, it will vary depending on each university. So you will have to tailor your portfolio for all of the universities you apply for, I'm afraid, which doesn't make it easy for you, but make sure you get it right for each one.
Yeah, Lee.
Sure. Probably just to answer that follow-up question for Lavinia as well, and what's the standard size for one page? I think the I'm speaking on Ravensbourne's behalf here, but we're less fussed about the delivery mechanism for your portfolio. And what I mean by that is it doesn't matter if it's a PowerPoint presentation, if it's a PDF, whether you've collated it on Photoshop and InDesign, or whether you've created your own website or a blog. That how you get your portfolio to us doesn't necessarily matter. What matters is the content itself, and to an extent, the layout. So we have students that will submit a website that has different kind of pages to that website, maybe some for their design work, some for their analytical work and their research, some for their photography. Some will create a blog and just send us the link. And blogs are really good because you can upload mixed media to that. So if you have video, if you have images, if you want to include text, things like Tumblr are really great to use. But most students opt for what we call a traditional portfolio, which is kind of a PDF or kind of like PowerPoint presentation, something like that. And so that the standard size, I guess, would be a computer screen for that. But when you have a maximum like Loughborough do, it's really important to maximize what you're using on that page. So for things like architecture, we would expect to see images. You probably wouldn't want to put more than maybe 3 images on a page because they can get quite distracting. The more images that you see on a page, the more kind of in your face it is, and it's quite overwhelming at some point when you're looking at multiple different images. So I would say 3 or 4 images to a page is enough, and then include your annotations. And I mentioned earlier, maybe 20 to 30% of each page at maximum is probably dedicated to annotations, and your words are just really there to contextualize what the user is seeing. So explaining what the photographs mean or what they're doing, explaining your process in creating those images. If your slide is based on your design process and you're looking at the evolution of the images or designs, your annotations can really help contextualize that. So everyone includes a guidance, and I think for most places you could probably go a little bit over that guidance, and I don't think you'd be penalized. The guidance is there to just give you a rough benchmark to hit, and I think you wouldn't want to go way over that. So if it's a 16 to 20 page portfolio, if you're submitting 40 pages for that and almost double, then that's probably going to be a bit of a problem. So the guidance is that kind of there for a reason, but there is flexibility within that guidance.
I think for UCA will be the same really. We don't really asking what exactly format you submit to your portfolio. It can be presentation, it can be like slideshow as well. It's really depending, and also what you want to include in for one page, like maybe piece of work, or maybe you want to put something together. But it's really depending on your projects, how you want to show us. But we can accept, I believe other universities, 3 of us here, we can accept a different kind of formatting, like share link as well. Just when you're sending us for the share link, make sure there's no password protected. If you want to, please do put the password when you're sending us as well. Just make sure we have access to your portfolio to review it. Okay, any questions? Other questions? We got 3 minutes.
I'm going to have to jump because I've got another session at 12,
Sure.
but thank you very much. If anyone has any questions about Loughborough or about architecture, please feel free to drop me an email. And yeah, hope you enjoyed the session. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Charlotte.
Bye. Right, as Charlotte said earlier, if you have any questions, do contact us. Here's our contact details. Take screenshots or write it down quickly and emailing us, and do go onto our website to look at. There is a lot of guidance and also more information about architecture. You can see student work as well. So another tip, I would say, go on to the different university websites to look at the graduations show or student work of how they done their project. So you will get a lot of idea from there as well. It's quite useful actually. No more questions?
I don't think so.
Okay, that's great then. Thank you so much for listening us, joining us today. And we can't see you, but we knew you're there. Thank you so much, Lee, for participating in this session as well. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Take care, guys. Bye.
Bye.